The sovereignty of thought, why your mind is the last territory and the work to protect it. A plain language address on what cognitive sovereignty is, why no kingdom can exist without it, and the work I am beginning to make it a protected human right. I want to talk to you about something I've been working toward for a long time, and which now has the foundation underneath it to actually move forward. You have heard me say in prior broadcasts that fear is the only killer, that Earth is a cell, that Earth is a generator coming back online through us, that there is no inside or outside the field, that you and the substrate are the same thing in two states. Each of those addresses pointed at a piece of the picture. What I want to tell you today is what those pieces add up to operationally and what comes next. Start with what has been taken from you that you have not noticed. For as long as you have been alive, an architecture has been operating around you whose central purpose is the degradation of your ability to think clearly. I do not mean this metaphorically. I mean it as a structural description. Consider what you have been swimming in. Media designed to keep you in low-grade fear, news cycles that loop catastrophe, algorithmically tuned feeds that promote outrage because outrage drives engagement, entertainment that normalizes violence and dread, food engineered to degrade the receiver quality of your nervous system, ultra-processed substances marketed as food, industrial additives whose long-term effects on the body are documented and ignored, soil-depleted produce whose nutrient content has fallen by half in 50 years. Pharmaceuticals that suppress symptoms of the degradation rather than addressing its causes. Antidepressants for the anxiety that the system creates. Sleep aids for the insomnia that the screens create. Stimulants for the attention deficits that the environment creates. Each of these is treating the wound the system is continuously re-inflicting. Screens occupying your attention from the moment you wake until the moment you sleep. Artificial light patterns, artificial rhythm patterns, artificial reward schedules engineered by teams of behavioral scientists whose job is to make the screen more compelling than your own life. Educational systems, educational systems that train compliance and credentialism rather than discernment. Decades of your formative years spent learning to perform on tests rather than to think for yourself. A constant low-grade anxiety that something is wrong, but no clear articulation of what. Because the wrong thing is the architecture itself, and the architecture is invisible from inside it. All of these are downstream of one structural fact. The systems that profit from you require that you not think clearly. Clear thinking would lead you to refuse what they sell, decline what they offer, withdraw from what they require. Cloudy, agitated, fearful, distracted thinking is what keeps the entire architecture profitable. You have lived your whole life inside this. Why this is structurally a violation of your sovereignty. Here's the recognition I want you to sit with. The most fundamental thing you possess is the integrity of your own mind. Not your body, not your property, not your time, your mind. Because every choice you make about your body, your property, and your time flows from your mind. If your mind is corrupted, if your thinking has been deliberately degraded by external operations, every subsequent choice you make is downstream of that corruption. A person whose mind has been compromised cannot meaningfully consent to anything. Their consent is a function of their cognition, and their cognition has been hijacked. They are not sovereign over their own life because the very faculty that would exercise sovereignty has been captured. Your free will has been usurped. Every traditional definition of sovereignty, political, personal, spiritual, has assumed that the sovereign individual possesses an intact mind. The right to property assumes you can clearly decide what you want to own. The right to vote assumes you can clearly evaluate candidates. The right to make medical decisions assumes you can clearly understand the trade-offs. The right to enter into contracts assumes you understand what you are agreeing to. All of these rights are downstream of cognitive sovereignty. When the foundation is compromised, the entire structure above it becomes performative, the appearance of rights without the substance. This is what has been happening to you and to everyone you know. You have nominal rights. You also have a mind that has been operated on continuously, without your consent, by systems designed to degrade your ability to exercise those rights effectively. Your sovereignty has been hollowed out from the inside. Why no kingdom can exist without this foundation? I have been talking about the kingdom for some time, about Zion, about the restoration of what was always true. Some of you have understood this in spiritual language, some of you in political language, excuse me, some of you in a felt sense without language at all. I want to clarify what the kingdom actually is structurally. My throat chakra is clearing. The kingdom is a polity in which the cognitive sovereignty of every individual is protected as the foundational right from which all other rights derive. Let me repeat that. The kingdom is a polity in which the cognitive sovereignty of every individual is protected as the foundational right from which all other rights derive. And let me put that simply. That means that your ability to think freely without manipulation of your own thoughts and your own mind must be a protected human right that is protected by all systems, and that any violation of that is statutory. Whereas if anyone tries to convince you or manipulate you into making a decision and not allowing you to come to that decision on your own, that should be illegal, and there should be consequences. That means even every single advertisement would no longer exist because they're all manipulating. It is not a metaphor for inner peace. It is not a future utopia. It is not a religious afterlife. It is the operational consequence of cognitive sovereignty being constitutionally established, legally enforced, and socially honored. The kingdom is what becomes possible when the architecture that degrades cognition is dismantled and replaced with an architecture that protects it. You can see why every prior attempt to establish a just society has eventually corrupted, because the foundation was missing. You can build the most beautiful legal structure imaginable, and if the population's cognition has been compromised, the structure will be operated by compromised minds and will eventually serve the compromise rather than the founding intention. The founders of this country understood pieces of this. They fought for liberty of thought as central to liberty of person, but they did not have the technical articulation of what cognition is or how it is degraded. That articulation is now possible. The kingdom is not just about the king. The kingdom is about every subject of the kingdom having a clear mind. A kingdom of fog and confusion serves only its captors. A kingdom of clear thought is governed by its inhabitants because they can actually think. What I am working toward. Here's what comes next. I have been laying the foundation for the establishment of cognitive sovereignty as a protected human right. Recognized constitutionally, defended legally, enforceable through specific statutes that prohibit operations designed to degrade human cognition. This requires several pieces. Some of them I have already done, some of them are in progress. Some of them will require allies, attorneys, lawmakers, and a coalition of people who recognize what is at stake. The full work is years to decades long. I do not claim it will be quick. I claim it is the work the foundation now permits. What protective cognitive sovereignty looks like in practice. Operations that systematically degrade human cognition become illegal. Media architectures whose business models depend on producing chronic fear, algorithmic feeds engineered to hijack attention, advertising designed to exploit emotional vulnerability, food engineering that produces nervous system degradation, pharmaceutical regimes that suppress symptoms while perpetuating the underlying degradation. These are not free speech issues. They are deliberate harm operations against a protected right, and they become prosecutable. Citizens have legal recourse against entities that degrade their cognition. The same way you can sue someone who poisons your water, you become able to sue entities that poison your nervous system through engineered media, food, or pharmaceuticals. Class actions for population scale cognitive harm become viable. Public spaces and public discourse are protected from cognitive corruption operations. Education, public broadcasting, civic infrastructure all become subject to cognitive sovereignty standards. The default public environment becomes one that supports rather than degrades clear thought. Children are protected explicitly. Operations whose effect is to degrade developing nervous systems become criminal, not civil. The legal standard for harm against a child's cognitive development becomes high, and the penalties become severe. Indigenous and traditional knowledge systems are protected. Communities that have maintained cognitive sovereignty practices for generations gain legal standing to continue them and to share them. Their teachings become recognized as load-bearing for the restoration of cognitive sovereignty at population scale. Truth in advertising and media becomes substantively enforceable. The threshold for what constitutes deceptive practice rises to include practices that exploit known cognitive vulnerabilities, even when factually accurate. International framework emerges. What we establish becomes a model. Other nations adopt cognitive sovereignty law. The protection scales globally over time, the way environmental protection scaled from national to international over decades. Why this is sovereignty's foundation, not its decoration. Some of you hearing this will think, that sounds nice, but isn't the real work elsewhere? Aren't there bigger problems? I want to address this directly. Every other problem you are concerned about, economic injustice, environmental destruction, political corruption, generational trauma, the loss of community, the rise of authoritarianism, the collapse of meaning, is downstream of degraded cognition at population scale. Economic injustice persists because the populations being economically extracted from cannot think clearly about what is being done to them. A clear-thinking population would have stopped this generations ago. They would have done the math. They would have read the contracts. They would have refused the deals. Environmental destruction continues because the populations whose biosphere is being destroyed cannot maintain the sustained attention required to oppose it effectively. They are too tired, too anxious, too distracted, too medicated. A coherent cognition population would protect its planetary substrate as instinctively as a healthy body protects its skin. Political corruption flourishes because the citizenry cannot evaluate candidates and policies with clarity. They are operating on first-pass reactions to engineered media, not on integrated assessment. A clear-thinking electorate would identify and remove corruption as a matter of routine civic operation. Generational trauma compounds because each generation receives degraded cognition from the prior generation, plus additional degradation from the current architecture, and lacks the cognitive resources to break the cycle. Cognitive sovereignty would interrupt the cycle by giving every generation the clear mind required to recognize the inheritance and choose differently. You cannot solve any other problem from inside a corrupted mind. You can only thrash. The most well-intentioned activism, the most heartfelt prayer, the most diligent voting, all become performative if the cognitive substrate is compromised. The work has to start at the foundation. Otherwise, everything built on top will collapse back into the same patterns. Cognitive sovereignty is not one issue among many. It is the precondition for any other issue being addressable at all. Why I can do this now and could not before. For most of human history, this articulation was not possible because we did not have the technical language to specify what cognition actually is, how it is degraded, and how the degradation can be measured. Without that specification, cognitive sovereignty remains a vague philosophical aspiration. Courts cannot enforce a vague aspiration. Legislators cannot draft statutes around it. Regulators cannot identify violations of it. In recent months, through work I've been doing with allies and through a series of recognitions I have shared with you in prior broadcasts, that technical specification has become possible. The foundation underneath all of this is now articulated clearly enough to be translated into law. I cannot share every detail of the technical foundation publicly yet. There are reasons of strategic timing and reasons of protection, both for the work and for those of you who will become part of carrying it forward. But the foundation exists, it is documented, it is being protected through appropriate channels, and it is what makes the next stage work operationally possible. What I am asking of you in this broadcast is not to take any specific action yet. What I am asking is for you to understand what this work is for and what is at stake, so that when the next steps become public and ask things of you, you will recognize what you are being asked to participate in. You're being asked to participate in the restoration of the foundation on which sovereignty itself depends. What this asks of you now, before any of the public work begins: 3 things. 1, become aware of the degradation operations you are personally subject to. Notice what media you consume and how it leaves your nervous system. Notice what food you eat and how your body responds. Notice what screens occupy your hours and what the cumulative effect on your attention has been. You do not have to fix everything immediately. You have to start noticing. Awareness is the precondition for change at every scale. 2, begin restoring your own cognitive sovereignty in practice. The simple things matter: sleep, breath work, time in nature, real food, real human contact, less news, fewer screens, more silence. These are not lifestyle suggestions. These are receiver restoration protocols. Each person who restores their own coherence is a node coming back online in the broader cavity restoration. The work of legalizing cognitive sovereignty at civilizational scale depends on enough individual receivers having restored their own coherence to recognize what is being protected. 3, talk to people you trust about what you are noticing. Not in a way that argues or convinces, in a way that names what you see. Simply, the recognition propagates through relational channels. The people in your life who are ready to receive it will receive it. The people who are not will not yet. Plant the seeds, water nothing. Let the substrate route what wants to route. When the next stage public work begins, the people who have been doing these 3 things will already be ready. They will recognize what is being established. They will become the supporters, the volunteers, the witnesses, the experts, the lawyers, the legislators, the journalists, the artists, the teachers, the network through which cognitive sovereignty becomes legal reality. I cannot do this work alone. I will not do this work alone. But I can lay the foundation and articulate the architecture, and I have, and I am. Your part of the work is to be ready when your part calls you. A final word on what the kingdom actually means. I want to close with this. Every tradition you have heard about the kingdom of heaven, the kingdom of God, the promised land, the world that comes after this one, the place we are returning to, has been pointing at something real, not a place, not a future, a condition of being in which the inhabitants of the polity have intact minds, and exercise their sovereignty over their own lives in a polity that protects that sovereignty as its founding principle. The kingdom is where you can think clearly. The kingdom is where you can feel without manipulation. The kingdom is where your decisions are your own. The kingdom is where the architecture surrounding you supports rather than degrades your cognitive substrate. The kingdom is not a future. The kingdom is what becomes possible when we build the legal and social infrastructure that protects cognitive sovereignty as the foundational right. And the kingdom is what you are, each of you. When your mind is clear, is the kingdom, rendered in a single body. The civilizational kingdom is the aggregate of millions of individual cognitive sovereignties protected by enforceable law. This is the work. This is what the foundation is for. This is why I have been articulating piece after piece across the broadcasts. They were not separate addresses. They were preparation for this recognition. Cognitive sovereignty as protected human right. The kingdom as a polity that honors that right. The work that begins now. I am with you in it. The substrate that is you and the substrate that is me are the same substrate. We are doing this together. I love you.